The auction block stood empty in the center of Butte, Montana's town square on that blistering August afternoon in 1882, waiting for the next woman to step up and offer herself for a picnic basket lunch with the highest bidder. And Benjamin Sawyer knew he was about to make the biggest fool of himself in front of the entire town. He stood at the back of the crowd, his weathered hat pulled low over his eyes, dust coating his boots from the long ride into town. Most folks in Butte knew him only as the quiet rancher who kept to himself on that spread 5 miles out past the gulch. He came to town for supplies, paid his bills on time, and never caused trouble. The saloon girls had long since given up trying to engage him in conversation, and the men at the card tables barely noticed when he passed through. Benjamin preferred it that way. Words had never come easy to him, not since he was a boy watching his father work their small ranch in silence, communicating more through gestures and hard work than lengthy conversation. But today was different. Today, Penelope Richardson stood at the front of the crowd, her hands clasped nervously before her cheeks flushed pink beneath the afternoon sun. She wore a simple blue calico dress that matched her eyes, and her dark hair was pulled back in a modest bun. She had arrived in Butte 3 months ago to take over the schoolhouse after the previous teacher had married and moved to Helena. In those 3 months, Benjamin had found excuses to ride past the schoolhouse more times than he cared to admit, watching from a distance as she rang the bell for the children, as she swept the steps, as she hung drawings in the windows. He had never spoken to her. Not once. What would a rough cowboy like him have to say to an educated woman from back east? She had studied at a normal school in Pennsylvania, or so the town gossip said. She could recite poetry and do complex mathematics. She played the piano at church on Sundays with delicate fingers that had never roped a steer or mended a fence. Next up we have Miss Penelope Richardson, our lovely school teacher. Mayor Hargrove's voice boomed across the square. Her basket contains fried chicken, biscuits with honey butter, apple pie, and lemonade. Who will start the bidding? Benjamin's heart hammered against his ribs. He had withdrawn $50 from his account at the bank that morning, more money than he had spent on anything besides livestock and land in 5 years. The bills sat folded in his shirt pocket, pressing against his chest like a promise he was terrified to make. $5. Called out Thomas Mitchell, the banker's son, a smug grin on his face. He was young, maybe 22, with slicked back hair and a pressed suit that had never seen a day of honest work. $7, countered Marcus Webb, who owned the general store. He was a widower, respectable enough, but Benjamin had seen how he looked at Penelope when she came in for supplies, like she was merchandise to be appraised. Penelope stood very still, her eyes fixed on some distant point beyond the crowd. Benjamin could see the tension in her shoulders, the way she held herself rigid as if bracing for something unpleasant. She had not wanted to participate in the auction, he knew. The school board had pressured her into it, suggesting that it would help her become part of the community, that refusing would seem unfriendly. She had agreed with obvious reluctance during the town meeting, her soft voice barely audible as she accepted. $10. Thomas Mitchell's voice rang out again, confident and loud. Several men in the crowd whistled. $10 was more than most working men made in a week. The bid was designed to intimidate, to establish dominance. Benjamin watched as Penelope's flush deepened, spreading down her neck. She looked uncomfortable, trapped. He should bid. He should step forward and offer something, anything. But his boots felt rooted to the dirt and his throat felt tight. What if she did not want him to bid? What if his attention was unwelcome? What if the whole town laughed at the idea of the silent cowboy, thinking he had any chance with the refined schoolteacher? Going once, Mayor Hargrove called out. $10 from young Mitchell. Penelope's eyes swept across the crowd then, and for just a moment they landed on Benjamin. He could not read her expression in that brief glance. Fear, hope, resignation. Then she looked away again, and he felt the moment slipping through his fingers like water. Going twice, Benjamin's hand moved to his pocket before his mind fully registered the decision. He pulled out the bills and stepped forward, his voice rusty from disuse. $50. The crowd fell silent. Then the laughter started, rippling through the gathered townspeople like wind through wheat. It was not cruel laughter exactly, but it was shocked, disbelieving. The quiet cowboy who never said more than 2 words together had just bid $50 on the schoolteacher's basket. Men elbowed each other and grinned. Women whispered behind their hands. $50, Mayor Hargrove repeated, his eyebrows shooting up. Did you say $50, Benjamin? Yes, sir, Benjamin said quietly, his face burning. He kept his eyes down, unable to look at Penelope, unable to bear seeing disgust or pity on her face. Thomas Mitchell scoffed. That is ridiculous. You cannot be serious. The bid stands if he has the money, the mayor said, surprise still evident in his voice. Do you have $50, Benjamin? Yes, sir. Benjamin held up the bills and the laughter grew louder. Look at old Ben, who knew he had it in him, someone called out. Quiet as a church mouse for 10 years, and now he is bidding $50. Poor Miss Richardson, stuck having lunch with a man who probably will not say 10 words the whole time. Benjamin's jaw tightened, but he kept his gaze down. He had expected this. He had known how it would look. The money was in his hand, real and solid. That was what mattered. Well, Thomas, the mayor asked. Do you wish to counter? Thomas looked furious, but he was not stupid enough to bid against $50 for a picnic basket, no matter how pretty the schoolteacher. Let him have it, he said dismissively. Not worth that much. Sold to Benjamin Sawyer for $50. The mayor's gavel came down on his makeshift podium. That is our highest bid of the day, folks. Benjamin, come collect your basket and your lunch companion. Benjamin forced himself to walk forward through the parting crowd, very aware of every eye on him, every whisper and chuckle. He climbed the steps to the platform and handed his money to the mayor, then finally allowed himself to look at Penelope Richardson. She was staring at him with wide eyes, her lips slightly parted in surprise. He braced himself for rejection, for embarrassment, for her to demand the mayor find a way out of this arrangement. Instead, she smiled at him. It was a small smile, tentative and sweet, but it transformed her entire face. Her eyes softened and the rigid tension in her shoulders eased. She smiled at him like he had done something wonderful instead of something foolish, like his bid had been a gift instead of an embarrassment. The laughter around them continued, but Benjamin barely heard it anymore. All he could see was that smile, shy and genuine, and meant only for him. Thank you, Penelope said softly, her voice carrying only to his ears. Thank you for bidding. Benjamin swallowed hard and managed a slight nod. Pleasure, Miss Richardson. Penelope, she corrected gently, reaching down to pick up her basket. Please call me Penelope. Benjamin, he replied. Or Ben, if you prefer. Benjamin, she said, as if testing the name on her tongue. That is a good, strong name. Someone in the crowd called out another joke about the silent cowboy, and Penelope's smile faded slightly. She glanced at the crowd, then back at Benjamin with something that looked like determination in her blue eyes. Shall we go find somewhere quiet to eat, away from all this noise? He appreciated her word choice, noise rather than people or crowd, as if the problem was not the presence of others but their volume and rudeness. There is a spot by the creek, just past the church, cottonwood trees for shade. That sounds perfect, Penelope said. And when she fell into step beside him, walking down the platform steps and through the dispersing crowd, Benjamin felt 10 feet tall despite the continuing murmurs and laughter around them. They walked in silence through the town, past the church and down a worn path toward the creek that ran along Butte's eastern edge. The sounds of the auction faded behind them, replaced by the rustle of leaves and the gentle burble of water over stones. Benjamin had come to this spot many times over the years when town got too loud, when the presence of too many people pressed in on him. He had never brought anyone here before. Penelope seemed content with the silence, not rushing to fill it with chatter as some women might. She walked gracefully despite the uneven path, holding her basket carefully, occasionally glancing at the landscape around them with what appeared to be genuine interest. When they reached the cottonwoods, Benjamin spread his jacket on the grass for her to sit on. She thanked him and settled down, arranging her skirts modestly around her legs, then began unpacking the basket. The food looked as delicious as promised: fried chicken with a golden crust, fluffy biscuits, a perfect pie with a lattice top, and a jar of lemonade with actual lemon slices floating in it. "I hope you like chicken," Penelope said as she set out 2 tin plates and utensils. "I worried that perhaps I should have made something more interesting, but the mayor said traditional food was best for these events." "I like chicken just fine," Benjamin assured her. He lowered himself to the grass across from her, removing his hat and setting it aside. "This looks real good." "You did not have to go to so much trouble." "It was no trouble. I enjoy cooking when I have the time." She handed him a plate with a piece of chicken and a biscuit. "During the school term, I am often too tired in the evenings to do much more than heat soup." "Teaching must be hard work," Benjamin said. It was easier to talk to her here, away from the crowd with just the two of them and the sound of the creek. All those children, different ages, different abilities. "It is challenging," Penelope admitted, serving herself some food, "but I love it." There is nothing quite like watching a child understand something for the first time, seeing their face light up when letters suddenly become words, or when a mathematics problem finally makes sense. She paused, then added quietly, "Though I confess the social aspects of teaching in a small town are more difficult than I anticipated." Benjamin took a bite of chicken to give himself time to formulate a response. The food was excellent, perfectly seasoned and cooked. "Folks here can be set in their ways," he finally said, "and they talk, but most of them mean well deep down." "Do they?" Penelope's voice held a note of doubt. "Sometimes I feel like I am always being watched, always being judged. Every move I make, every word I say, it all gets discussed and analyzed. Back home in Pennsylvania, I was just another student at the normal school, just another young woman trying to make her way. Here, I am the school teacher, and apparently that comes with expectations I did not anticipate." "Like participating in picnic auctions," Benjamin said. "Exactly." Penelope met his eyes, and he saw relief there, as if she was grateful he understood. "I wanted to refuse, but Mrs. Hargrove made it clear that would be seen as me thinking I was too good for local customs. She said the previous teacher always participated in community events, and that I needed to show I was willing to be part of the town, not just work here." Benjamin frowned. "That does not seem fair, making you feel obligated to do something that makes you uncomfortable." "No, it does not," Penelope agreed softly. "I stood up there feeling like livestock at auction, listening to men bid on the chance to spend time with me, and I just wanted to disappear." She picked at her biscuit, then looked up at him again with that same sweet smile from before. "But then you bid, and somehow it felt different. Everyone else was bidding like it was a game, trying to show off or make a point. But you looked terrified." Benjamin felt his ears go hot. "That obvious?" To me it was, Penelope said. And I thought, here is a man who is as uncomfortable with this whole spectacle as I am, but he is doing it anyway. That took courage, Benjamin, real courage, more than it took for Thomas Mitchell to throw around his father's money. I just wanted to help, Benjamin said quietly. You looked so unhappy up there. And I thought, well, maybe if I bid, at least you would have lunch with someone who would not make you uncomfortable. Someone who could appreciate good food and a quiet afternoon without needing to turn it into something it was not. Penelope's eyes shimmered, and for a moment Benjamin feared she might cry, but instead her smile widened. That is one of the kindest things anyone has done for me since I arrived in Butte. Perhaps the kindest thing anyone has done for me in a very long time. They ate in companionable silence for a while, and Benjamin found himself relaxing in a way he rarely did around other people. Penelope did not seem to expect constant conversation, nor did she appear bored by the lack of it. She ate with good appetite, complimented the shade of the cottonwoods, and watched a dragonfly hover over the creek with evident fascination. You come here often? She asked eventually, pouring lemonade into 2 tin cups. When I am in town and need some peace, Benjamin said. It is a good spot, quiet. I can see why you like it. Penelope handed him a cup. Quiet is underrated, I think. Everyone always wants to fill silence with words as if silence is something to be afraid of. But sometimes silence is just comfortable. That is exactly right, Benjamin said, surprised by how well she had articulated something he had always felt but never managed to express. Most people make me tired because they talk so much. After an hour in town, listening to all the chatter and noise, I just want to get back to the ranch where it is just me and the horses and the land. You have a ranch? Penelope asked with interest. A small one. 5 miles out past the gulch, mostly horses, some cattle. I run it myself, do all the work. It is not fancy, but it is mine. That sounds wonderful, Penelope said wistfully. I have always loved horses, though I have not ridden much since coming here. Back home, my father kept 2 horses, and I would ride nearly every day before I left for normal school. You could come riding sometime, Benjamin offered, then immediately worried he had overstepped. I mean, if you wanted, I have several gentle horses that would be good for riding. We could ride the property, see the land. Penelope's face lit up. I would love that, truly. It has been months since I have been on a horse, and I miss it terribly. They talked more easily after that, conversation flowing more naturally than Benjamin had experienced with anyone in years. Penelope told him about Pennsylvania, about her childhood on the outskirts of Philadelphia, about her decision to become a teacher. Her mother had died when she was 15, and her father, a clerk, had remarried within a year to a woman who made it clear she resented having a nearly grown stepdaughter in the house. I left for normal school as soon as I was old enough, Penelope explained, her voice matter of fact but with an undercurrent of old pain. My father paid for the first year, but after that I worked for my tuition, taking in mending and tutoring other students. When I graduated, I wanted to go as far from Philadelphia as I could. Montana seemed about as far as I could get while still being in the country. Do you regret coming here? Benjamin asked. Penelope considered the question carefully. Sometimes, she admitted. The loneliness is hard. I am used to being on my own, but there is a difference between being independent and being isolated. In Butte, I am the teacher, not Penelope. I am not sure anyone here knows me as a person, just as a role I fill. I would like to know you as a person, Benjamin said quietly, if you would let me. Penelope's smile returned, softer and even more genuine than before. I would like that too, and I would like to know you, Benjamin Sawyer. I want to know about your ranch, about how you came to Butte, about what you think about when you are out there with your horses and you're quiet." So Benjamin told her things he had not told anyone in years. He talked about growing up in Wyoming on his parents' small ranch, about losing both of them to influenza when he was 19, about selling that property and drifting for a few years before settling in Montana. He talked about buying his land, about building his cabin with his own hands, about the satisfaction of working from sunrise to sunset and seeing tangible results of that work. "It is a simple life," he said. "Some might say too simple, but it suits me. I know every corner of my property, every fence line, every water source. I know which meadow gets the best grass in spring, which canyon provides shelter in winter storms. It is mine in a way that goes deeper than just the deed at the land office." "That does not sound simple at all," Penelope said thoughtfully. "That sounds profound. You have created something meaningful, something that sustains you not just physically but in deeper ways. That is more than most people ever achieve." Benjamin looked at her, really looked at her, and saw intelligence and understanding in her blue eyes that made his chest feel tight. She was beautiful, yes, but it was more than that. She saw him, truly saw him, in a way no one else ever had. "The sun is getting lower," Penelope observed eventually, glancing at the sky. "I suppose we should head back before people start talking about us being gone too long." Benjamin wanted to protest that he did not care what people said, but he knew it was different for her. Her reputation mattered in a way his did not. If people started gossip about impropriety, it could cost her position at the school. "I will walk you back," he said, rising and offering his hand to help her up. She took it, her hand small and warm in his, and allowed him to pull her to her feet. She packed up the basket while Benjamin retrieved his jacket and shook out the grass. They walked back toward town as the sun painted the sky in shades of orange and pink, their steps slow, neither seeming eager to return to civilization. As they reached the edge of town, Penelope stopped and turned to face him. "Benjamin, I want you to know that today was lovely. The best afternoon I have had since arriving in Montana. Thank you for your kindness and for your company." "The pleasure was mine, Penelope, truly." He hesitated, then forced himself to continue. "Would you allow me to call on you? Properly, I mean. I know I am not educated like you, and I am not much for fancy words, but I would very much like to see you again." "I would like that," Penelope said immediately, her eyes shining. "I would like that very much. Perhaps next Sunday after church, you could come for dinner. I rent a small house behind the schoolhouse, and I promise to cook something better than chicken." "The chicken was perfect," Benjamin said, meaning it. "But yes, Sunday dinner sounds real fine." They walked the rest of the way to Penelope's house in comfortable silence. At her door, she turned and impulsively reached up to touch his arm. "Do not listen to their laughter, Benjamin. You are worth 10 of Thomas Mitchell and his kind. Any woman would be lucky to have your attention." Before he could respond, she slipped inside, leaving him standing in the gathering dusk with his heart hammering and a smile on his face that felt strange and wonderful all at once. The next week passed slowly for Benjamin. He threw himself into work on the ranch, mending fences, training a young mare, checking on his cattle. But no matter how busy he kept himself, his thoughts constantly drifted to Penelope. He remembered the sound of her laugh, the intelligence in her eyes, the way she had understood his need for quiet without him having to explain it. Saturday evening, he rode into Butte to buy supplies for Sunday dinner. He wanted to bring something, though he was not sure what would be appropriate. At the general store, Marcus Webb gave him a knowing look as he selected a bottle of wine and a small box of peppermint candies. "Heard you made quite the impression at the auction last week," Marcus said, wrapping the purchases. $50. That is some serious courting money." "Just wanted to help out the school fund," Benjamin said evenly, though his ears felt hot. "Sure," Marcus said with a grin that suggested he did not believe that for a moment. "Well, good luck to you. Miss Richardson seems like a fine woman. Better you than young Mitchell, if you ask me. That boy needs to learn money cannot buy everything." Sunday dawned clear and beautiful, warm but not hot, with a gentle breeze that carried the scent of pine from the mountains. Benjamin bathed in the creek on his property, shaved carefully, and put on his best shirt and pants. They were not fancy, but they were clean and well-maintained. He brushed his hat until it looked as presentable as possible for a working man's hat, then saddled his gentlest mare and rode toward Butte. The church service seemed to last forever. Benjamin sat in his usual spot near the back, very aware of Penelope at the piano at the front. She played beautifully, her fingers moving over the keys with confidence and grace. When she played the closing hymn, Benjamin thought he saw her glance in his direction, though he could not be sure from that distance. After the service, he waited outside while she gathered her music and spoke with a few parishioners. He saw Mrs. Hargrove corner her briefly, talking in that animated way the mayor's wife had, and noticed Penelope's polite but slightly strained smile. Then she was free, walking toward him with genuine pleasure on her face. "Good morning, Benjamin. I was hoping you would still come." "Would not miss it," he said. "You play real beautiful. The music, I mean." "Thank you. Piano is one of my great pleasures. My mother taught me when I was very young." She fell into step beside him as they walked toward her house. "I hope you are hungry. I may have cooked too much food." Her small house was neat and cheerful, with curtains in the windows and flowers in a box by the door. Inside, it was simply furnished but cozy, with books on every available surface and student drawings pinned to one wall. The smell of roasting meat filled the space, making Benjamin's mouth water. "Beef roast with potatoes and carrots," Penelope announced, checking the pot on her stove. "And I made bread this morning and berry cobbler for dessert." "You did not have to go to so much trouble," Benjamin said, though he was deeply touched that she had. "It was no trouble at all. I enjoy cooking for someone other than myself." She gestured for him to sit at her small table. "Besides, after you spent $50 on a picnic basket, the least I can do is feed you a decent meal." Over dinner, they talked more freely than they had even by the creek. Penelope wanted to know everything about ranch life, asking detailed questions about horse training, cattle management, the seasonal rhythms of the work. Benjamin found himself explaining things he had never articulated before, describing how you could read a horse's mood from the set of its ears, how you learned to predict weather from the behavior of the animals, how satisfying it was to help a newborn calf take its first wobbly steps. In turn, Penelope told him about her students, describing each child with such affection and detail that Benjamin could almost see them. She talked about the challenges of teaching multiple grade levels simultaneously, about the satisfaction when a struggling student finally grasped a concept, about her dreams of maybe one day starting a lending library for the town. "Most families cannot afford many books," she explained. "And the children would benefit so much from access to more reading material. I have been saving a bit from my salary each month, thinking perhaps I could eventually purchase enough books to start a small collection." "That is a fine idea," Benjamin said. "Real generous of you, using your own money like that." "Well, what else would I spend it on?" Penelope said practically. "My needs are simple. I have a roof over my head, food to eat, and meaningful work. The rest might as well go toward something worthwhile." As the afternoon wore on, Benjamin felt more comfortable with Penelope than he could remember feeling with anyone. There was none of the pressure he usually felt around other people, no expectation that he perform or pretend to be something he was not. She seemed genuinely interested in his thoughts and opinions, never talking down to him despite her education, never making him feel lesser for his simpler lifestyle. When it was time for him to leave, Penelope walked him to the door with obvious reluctance. "This was wonderful, Benjamin. Thank you for coming. Thank you for having me. The food was delicious and the company even better." He fidgeted with his hat. "Could I see you again? Maybe take you riding like we talked about?" "Yes, please, I would love that." Penelope smiled up at him. "Next Saturday, perhaps?" "If the weather holds. Saturday would be perfect. I will come get you in the morning, bring an extra horse. We can pack a lunch, spend the day out on the land." "I will look forward to it all week," Penelope said softly, and the way she looked at him made Benjamin's heart skip. That week was even longer than the previous one. Benjamin caught himself smiling at odd moments while working, remembering something Penelope had said or the way her eyes lit up when she talked about her students. He prepared for Saturday's ride carefully, selecting his 2 gentlest horses, checking all the tack for any wear or damage, planning a route that would show her the best views of his property without being too demanding for someone who had not ridden in months. Saturday morning arrived crisp and clear. Benjamin rode to Penelope's house just after dawn, leading a calm chestnut mare named Rosie who had the temperament of a saint. Penelope was waiting, dressed in a practical split skirt that would allow her to ride comfortably. She greeted both horses enthusiastically, producing apples from her pockets and feeding them with the comfortable familiarity of someone who genuinely loved animals. "Oh, she is beautiful," Penelope said, stroking Rosie's neck. "What is her name?" "Rosie." "She is gentle as they come, good for any level of rider. Thought she would be a good match for you. She is perfect." Penelope let Rosie sniff her thoroughly, talking softly to the mare the whole time. "Hello, Rosie. What a good girl you are. We are going to be great friends, I can tell." Benjamin helped her mount, which she did with only a little awkwardness, and soon they were riding out of town toward his ranch. Penelope took to riding again quickly, her body remembering the rhythm even if her muscles protested a bit from disuse. By the time they reached his property, she was sitting more confidently in the saddle, a look of pure joy on her face. "Oh, Benjamin, this is magnificent," she breathed, taking in the rolling meadows, the stands of pine, the mountains rising in the distance. "You did not tell me it was this beautiful." "It has its moments," Benjamin said, feeling proud despite himself. "Come on, I will show you my favorite spot." He led her on a meandering route through his land, pointing out various features, telling her the history of how he had acquired different parcels, what his plans were for future expansion. Penelope listened with genuine interest, asking intelligent questions, offering observations that showed she understood the work and dedication involved. They stopped for lunch in a high meadow with a view that stretched for miles. Benjamin had packed bread, cheese, dried meat, and fresh peaches from the general store. They sat on the grass, letting the horses graze nearby, and ate while watching clouds drift across the impossibly blue sky. "I could stay here forever," Penelope said dreamily. "Just sit in this meadow and watch the world turn. No schedules, no expectations, just this peace and beauty." "You are welcome here anytime," Benjamin said, meaning it more deeply than his simple words conveyed. "Anytime you need peace or quiet or just space to breathe, my door is always open to you." Penelope turned to look at him, her blue eyes serious. "Benjamin, I need to tell you something. These past 2 weeks, getting to know you, it has meant more to me than I can properly express. For the first time since coming to Montana, I do not feel alone. I feel seen and understood and valued for who I actually am, not for what role I fill in this town." "I feel the same," Benjamin admitted, his heart pounding. I have been alone a long time, Penelope. By choice, mostly, because I could not find anyone who understood me. But you do. You see the world the same way I do. And being with you, talking with you, it feels right in a way nothing else ever has. I am falling in love with you, Penelope said quietly, her voice steady despite the enormity of the admission. I know it has only been 2 weeks, and perhaps that is too fast, but it is the truth. I think about you constantly. I count the hours until I can see you again. And when I am with you, I feel more myself than I have felt in years. Benjamin's breath caught. He had never been good with words, had never been able to express the deep emotions he felt. But looking at Penelope, seeing the hope and vulnerability on her face, he knew he had to try. I love you too, he said, the words feeling both strange and absolutely right. I did not know it was possible to feel this way about someone. But everything about you, your kindness and intelligence and the way you understand silence, the way you see beauty in simple things, it all just fits with me somehow. Like you are the piece I did not know was missing. Tears spilled down Penelope's cheeks, but she was smiling. What do we do now? Well, Benjamin said slowly, reaching out to take her hand. I suppose I should do this proper. Penelope Richardson, would you allow me to court you with the intention of marriage? I know I am not fancy, and I cannot offer you a life of luxury or society, but I can promise you a home filled with peace and love and respect. I can promise you all the quiet moments you need, all the books you want to read, and a partner who will value you for exactly who you are. Yes, Penelope said immediately, squeezing his hand. Yes to all of it. The courtship, the intention, the promise of a life together. I do not want fancy or society or luxury. I want you, Benjamin. I want this land and this peace and a life where I can be myself without apology. Benjamin pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her, and she came willingly, resting her head against his chest. They sat like that for a long time, holding each other in the high meadow, listening to the wind and the distant call of birds, feeling the rightness of being together. When they finally rode back to town that evening, everything had changed. They had an understanding now, a promise made in that meadow that felt as binding as any formal engagement. Benjamin escorted Penelope to her door, very proper despite the fact that they had spent the entire day alone together, and they made plans to see each other the following week. The courtship that followed was the happiest time of Benjamin's life. He rode into Butte twice a week, taking Penelope on rides, sharing meals, spending long hours talking about everything and nothing. They discussed books, with Penelope lending him volumes from her personal collection, and Benjamin discovering he enjoyed reading when it was followed by conversations with someone who could help him understand the deeper meanings. They talked about their future, making plans with the giddy excitement of two people who had found something rare and precious. Penelope wanted to continue teaching, at least for a while, and Benjamin supported that completely. They discussed where they would live, with Penelope expressing interest in the ranch house but concern about the distance from the school. I could build an addition, Benjamin suggested. Make it bigger, more comfortable for you. And we could get a wagon, something easier than riding horseback every day when the weather turns cold. I could drive you to town in the mornings, pick you up in the afternoons. You would do that, Penelope asked. Drive me back and forth every day, of course. Your teaching is important to you, so it is important to me. Benjamin said it matter-of-factly, as if there was no other possible response. The town watched their courtship with interest. Some folks were happy for them, saying it was about time the quiet rancher found someone. Others were more skeptical, wondering what an educated woman like Penelope Richardson saw in a simple cowboy like Benjamin Sawyer. The gossips predicted it would not last. that Penelope would come to her senses and realize she could do better. But as the weeks turned into months, even the skeptics had to admit that the match seemed solid. Anyone who saw Benjamin and Penelope together could see the genuine affection between them, the easy companionship, the way they seemed to communicate without words in that way long married couples sometimes did. In late October, 4 months after the picnic basket auction that had brought them together, Benjamin asked Penelope to marry him officially. He did it in the high meadow where they had first confessed their love, getting down on one knee in the grass with a simple gold band he had purchased from a jeweler in Helena on a special trip just for that purpose. Penelope Richardson, you have made me happier than I ever thought possible. Would you do me the great honor of becoming my wife? Yes, Penelope said, tears streaming down her face. Yes, Benjamin Sawyer, I will marry you. They set the wedding for December, giving Benjamin time to complete the addition to his ranch house and Penelope time to prepare. She had no family to invite. Her father had not responded to her letters about Benjamin, and she had no desire to reach out to her stepmother. Benjamin had no family either, making them both orphans in a sense, building a new family from just the two of them. The wedding took place in the church in Butte on a cold December morning, with snow falling gently outside the windows. Penelope wore a simple blue dress she had made herself, with white lace at the collar and cuffs. Benjamin wore a new suit, the first suit he had ever owned, purchased specially for the occasion. Mayor Hargrove gave Penelope away since she had no father or male relative to do so, and Mrs. Hargrove cried throughout the ceremony. As Benjamin slipped the gold band onto Penelope's finger and kissed her for the first time as his wife, he thought about that day in August when he had gathered all his courage to bid $50 on a picnic basket. The whole town had laughed at him, thought him foolish, never imagined that the quiet cowboy and the shy schoolteacher could find such happiness together. But here they were, married and in love, and Benjamin did not care what anyone had thought or said. All that mattered was the woman beside him, his wife, his partner, the love of his life. They honeymooned at the ranch, spending a week alone together without any trips to town or outside interruptions. The expanded house was cozy and warm, with a new addition that included a larger bedroom and a separate room Penelope could use as a study for her books and schoolwork. Benjamin had built shelves along one wall specifically for her growing collection of books, and when she saw them, she cried with happiness. "You built me a library," she said wonderingly, running her hands over the smooth wood. "Benjamin, this is beautiful." "You need a place for your books," he said simply, "and space to work on your lessons. Figured you would want somewhere that was just yours." Married life suited them both. Benjamin drove Penelope to the schoolhouse every morning in the wagon, picking her up every afternoon. She taught during the day while he worked the ranch, and in the evenings they cooked together, read together, talked about their days. On weekends, they rode out over the property, with Penelope becoming an accomplished rider once again, comfortable on horseback in any weather. In the spring, Penelope announced she was expecting a child. Benjamin was overwhelmed with joy and terror in equal measure, worried about Penelope's health, about his ability to be a good father, about all the ways he might fail this new tiny person who would depend on him. "We will figure it out together," Penelope assured him, taking his hands in hers. "Just like we figure out everything else. You are going to be a wonderful father, Benjamin, patient and kind and steady, all the things a child needs." Their son was born in November of 1883, a healthy baby boy they named William after Benjamin's father. Benjamin held his son for the first time with tears running down his face, marveling at the tiny fingers and toes, the miniature perfection of this person he and Penelope had created together. "He is beautiful," Penelope whispered, exhausted but radiant. "Our son, our family." Penelope took a year off from teaching after William was born, wanting to focus on their son in his early months. Benjamin hired a young man from town to help with some of the ranch work, giving him more time to spend with his growing family. They were not wealthy, but they were comfortable, with enough money for necessities and simple pleasures, and more happiness than Benjamin had ever imagined possible. When William was 14 months old, Penelope returned to teaching part-time, taking William with her to the schoolhouse on the days she worked. The older students helped watch him, and he became something of a mascot for the school, toddling between desks and charming everyone with his bright smile. Life settled into a rhythm of work and family, seasons turning from one to the next. In the summer of 1885, Penelope announced another pregnancy, and this time Benjamin was more excited than terrified. Their daughter was born in March of 1886, a tiny girl with Penelope's blue eyes and Benjamin's dark hair. They named her Margaret, after Penelope's mother. With 2 children, Penelope decided to stop teaching at the school, though she continued to tutor students privately from their home and maintained the lending library she had finally established in town. Benjamin expanded the ranch, buying more land, increasing his herd. They were never going to be the richest people in Montana, but they built a good life through hard work and careful management. Over the years, Benjamin and Penelope became pillars of the community in their own quiet way. They attended church every Sunday, supported local causes, and were known for their fairness and kindness. The people who had laughed at Benjamin's bid on the picnic basket eventually came to see that the quiet cowboy had known exactly what he was doing, that he had recognized something precious and been willing to pay for it. Thomas Mitchell, who had once competed with Benjamin for Penelope's basket, eventually married a woman from Helena and moved away. Marcus Webb remarried and often told people that he had known all along Benjamin and Penelope were perfect for each other. The mayor and his wife became good friends with the Sawyers, frequently visiting the ranch for Sunday dinners. In 1890, when William was 7 and Margaret was 4, Penelope discovered she was pregnant again. This pregnancy was unexpected but welcomed, and in the spring of 1891 they welcomed another son, James. Benjamin was 43 by then, Penelope 34, and they joked that James would keep them young. Their 3 children grew up on the ranch, learning to ride before they could walk well, helping with chores as soon as they were able, receiving an education from their mother that was far superior to what most children in Montana received. William showed an aptitude for working with horses like his father, while Margaret had her mother's love of books and learning. Little James was adventurous and fearless, constantly getting into trouble and making his parents laugh. In the evenings, after the children were in bed, Benjamin and Penelope would sit on the porch of their expanded house, watching the sun set over the mountains, holding hands, still finding comfort in each other's company after all these years. Sometimes they talked about the picnic basket auction, laughing about how nervous they had both been, marveling at how that one afternoon had changed both their lives so completely. "I am glad you bid," Penelope would say. "I am glad you smiled," Benjamin would reply, and it was true. Everything good in their lives had flowed from that moment when Benjamin had found his courage and Penelope had shown her acceptance. From that unlikely beginning, they had built a life neither of them could have imagined, full of love and laughter, and the kind of deep contentment that came from being truly known and valued by another person. As Benjamin grew older, he spent more time teaching William and James to run the ranch, knowing that one day it would be theirs. Margaret, showing no interest in ranching but a deep love of learning, announced at age 15 that she wanted to become a teacher like her mother. Penelope began tutoring her in the advanced subjects she would need, and they made plans for Margaret to attend normal school in a few years. William married at 22, bringing his wife Anna to live on the ranch and help with the work. They built a small house on the property, close enough to the main house that everyone could see each other daily but far enough for privacy. When William and Anna had their first child, a daughter they named Penelope after her grandmother, Benjamin held his granddaughter with the same wonder he had felt holding his own children. "We are building something here," Penelope said to Benjamin one evening as they watched William and Anna walk toward their house with baby Penelope in Anna's arms. "A family, a legacy. All because you were brave enough to bid on a picnic basket." "All because you were kind enough to smile at me," Benjamin corrected. Margaret left for normal school in 1905, promising to write every week. She kept her promise, sending long letters about her classes, her fellow students, her plans for the future. James, now 14, had decided he wanted to raise horses specifically, breeding and training them for sale, and Benjamin began teaching him everything he knew about selecting bloodlines and gentling young colts. In 1907, on a cold December morning much like the one when they had married, Benjamin and Penelope celebrated their 25th wedding anniversary. Their children threw them a party at the ranch house, now expanded further to accommodate the growing family. William and Anna had 2 children now, and Anna was expecting a third. Margaret was home for the holidays, engaged to a young teacher she had met in Helena, planning a summer wedding. As Benjamin looked around the crowded house, filled with children and grandchildren and laughter and love, he felt overwhelming gratitude for the life he had lived. He thought about that young man he had been, so lonely and isolated, never imagining he could find someone who understood him. He thought about Penelope standing on that auction platform, looking so uncomfortable and out of place, and how he had almost been too afraid to bid. "What are you thinking about?" Penelope asked, coming to stand beside him with a cup of coffee in her hands. She was 50 now, her dark hair streaked with silver, lines at the corners of her eyes, but to Benjamin she was as beautiful as the day he first saw her. "I am thinking about how lucky I am," Benjamin said. "How different my life could have been if I had let fear stop me that day in August." "I am the lucky one," Penelope said, leaning into him. "You gave me everything I never knew I wanted. A home, a family, a partnership built on respect and understanding and love. You gave me peace, Benjamin. Real peace." "We gave each other everything," Benjamin said, wrapping his arm around her. "That is what makes it work." Margaret announced her engagement officially that night, showing everyone the ring her intended had given her. James, at 16, was courting a girl from town, the daughter of the new schoolteacher who had taken over when Penelope retired. William talked about expanding the cattle operation, buying more grazing land to the north. In 1910, Margaret married her teacher in a ceremony in Helena, with the whole family traveling to attend. In 1912, James married his sweetheart Hannah in the church in Butte, the same church where Benjamin and Penelope had married 30 years earlier. By 1915, all 3 of their children were married and settled, William running the ranch with Benjamin in a semi-retired advisory role, Margaret teaching in Helena, and James building his horse breeding operation on land adjacent to the main ranch. Benjamin was 68 now, slowing down but still active, still riding out over the land he loved on good weather days. Penelope was 61, her hair fully silver now, glasses perched on her nose when she read, but still sharp and engaged with the world around her. They had 7 grandchildren at last count, with more likely to come, and the ranch they had built together was thriving under William's management. On a warm June evening in 1916, Benjamin and Penelope sat on their porch watching the sunset, as they had done thousands of times before. Benjamin held Penelope's hand, his thumb rubbing over the gold band she had worn for 34 years. "You ever wonder what your life would have been like if you had stayed in Pennsylvania?" Benjamin asked. "Never," Penelope said firmly. "I cannot even imagine that life anymore. Montana is my home. This ranch is my home. You are my home, Benjamin. Everything good in my life started the day you bid $50 on my picnic basket." Everybody laughed, Benjamin remembered. "Let them laugh," Penelope said. "We won. We built this beautiful life, this beautiful family. We found love and happiness and peace. That is worth all the laughter in the world." As the sun dipped below the mountains, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink, Benjamin pulled Penelope closer and kissed the top of her head. They sat in comfortable silence, the kind of silence they had always shared, the silence that had first told them they were meant to be together. In the distance, they could hear William calling his children in for supper. Closer by, they could see the lights coming on in James and Hannah's house. Somewhere in Helena, Margaret was likely correcting papers or planning lessons, carrying on the teaching tradition her mother had started. The family Benjamin and Penelope had created was spreading out, growing, flourishing. It had all started with a picnic basket auction, with a quiet cowboy finding the courage to bid, with a shy schoolteacher offering a smile that changed everything. From that simple beginning had grown something beautiful and lasting, a love story for the ages, a partnership that had weathered all challenges and emerged stronger. They had built a legacy not just of land and livestock, but of love and commitment, and showing their children what a real marriage looked like. They had proved that quiet strength was just as valuable as flashy confidence, that understanding and respect could form a stronger foundation than passion alone. As darkness fell and the stars began to emerge in the Montana sky, Benjamin and Penelope remained on their porch, holding hands, content in the life they had built together. The town that had once laughed at the unlikely pairing had long since recognized the truth, that Benjamin Sawyer and Penelope Richardson were two halves of one whole, perfectly matched despite their differences, maybe even because of them. In 1920, Butte held a celebration for the town's founding, and as part of the festivities, they honored longtime residents who had contributed to the community. Benjamin and Penelope were among those honored, recognized for their years of service, their raising of a fine family, and their example of dedication and love. When the mayor, now a different man than the one who had presided over that long-ago auction, asked Benjamin to say a few words, the crowd fell silent. Benjamin was in his 70s now, his hair white, his movements slower, but his mind was still sharp and his love for his wife as strong as ever. He stood slowly, helped by William on one side and James on the other, and looked out at the gathered townspeople. Penelope sat in the front row, her silver hair gleaming in the sunlight, her blue eyes still bright and intelligent, watching him with love and encouragement. "I am not a man of many words," Benjamin started, his voice rougher than it once was but still steady. "Most folks here know that about me, but I want to say something today about what Butte has meant to me, to my family." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "I came to this town more than 40 years ago, young and alone, looking for a place to build a life. I found that place, bought my land, built my ranch, but I was still alone, still searching for something I could not name." His eyes found Penelope's, and she smiled at him, that same sweet smile she had given him at the auction all those years ago. Then one day in 1882, there was a picnic basket auction. And there was a schoolteacher, new to town, standing up there looking like she wanted to be anywhere else in the world. And I thought, I know how she feels. I know that feeling of not quite fitting in, of being judged, of being alone in a crowd. The audience was completely silent now, hanging on every word from a man who rarely spoke more than a sentence at a time. So I bid on her basket, $50, which was a lot of money to me then, and people laughed. They thought I was crazy, thought it was funny that someone like me would think someone like her could ever care about me. He paused, then continued. But she smiled at me. That smile told me everything I needed to know. Told me she saw me, really saw me, and that maybe I was not so crazy after all. Benjamin's voice grew stronger. That was 38 years ago. In those years, Penelope and I have built a life together that has given me more joy than I ever thought possible. We raised 3 children, have 7 grandchildren so far, built a ranch that will support our family for generations. But more than any of that, we found in each other a true partner, someone who understood us and valued us for who we really were. He looked around at the crowd. The point I am trying to make is this: do not let laughter stop you. Do not let fear or doubt or other people's opinions keep you from reaching for what you know is right. If I had listened to that laughter, if I had let embarrassment or uncertainty stop me from bidding that day, I would have missed out on everything that matters in my life. Everything. There were tears on many faces now, including Penelope's. So thank you, Butte, for being our home. Thank you for giving us a place to raise our family, to build our life. Thank you for eventually accepting that maybe the quiet cowboy and the shy schoolteacher knew something the rest of you did not. He smiled slightly. And thank you for that picnic basket auction. Best $50 I ever spent. The crowd erupted in applause, many people standing. Benjamin made his way slowly off the stage and back to Penelope, who stood to embrace him with tears streaming down her face. "That was beautiful," she whispered. "The most words I have ever heard you say in public." "Some things are worth saying," Benjamin replied. As they settled back into their seats to watch the rest of the ceremony, surrounded by their children and grandchildren, Benjamin felt complete in a way that went beyond words. He had found his place in the world, his purpose, his home. And it had all started with one moment of courage and one smile of acceptance. The years continued to pass, as years always do. Benjamin and Penelope grew older together, their love deepening rather than fading with age. They celebrated their 40th anniversary in 1922, their 50th in 1932. Benjamin was 85 by then, Penelope 76, both still sharp mentally though their bodies had slowed considerably. William ran the ranch now with the help of his sons, both of whom had grown into fine young men dedicated to the land and the work. Margaret had retired from teaching and returned to Montana to be closer to family. James's horse breeding operation had gained a reputation throughout the state for producing quality animals. On a quiet afternoon in the spring of 1933, Benjamin and Penelope sat on their porch, watching the land they had built their life on. The mountains in the distance still took Benjamin's breath away after 50 years, and the peace of the ranch still filled him with contentment. "We did good, did we not?" Penelope said softly, her hand in his. "We did very good," Benjamin agreed. "Better than I ever dreamed possible. I love you, Benjamin Sawyer. I have loved you since that day you bid on my basket, and I will love you until my last breath and beyond." "I love you too, Penelope. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, the best thing that could have happened to any man." They sat in their comfortable silence, the silence that had always connected them, watching the sun move across the sky, feeling the warmth of each other's presence. Around them, the ranch bustled with life, grandchildren playing in the yard, William and his sons working with the horses, the whole beautiful complex web of family and work and life they had created together. Benjamin thought about that young man he had been, standing at the back of the crowd in the town square, working up the courage to bid. He thought about how terrified he had been, how certain everyone would laugh at him, how sure he was that he would be rejected. And then he thought about Penelope's smile, about her acceptance, about all the years of love and partnership that had followed. "No regrets?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. "Not a single one," Penelope said firmly. "This life with you, it has been exactly what I needed. What I wanted. I would not change a single moment." As the afternoon faded into evening, they remained on their porch, two old people who had loved each other well for 51 years, who had built something beautiful and lasting, who had proved that quiet strength and shy smiles could grow into something magnificent. The town had laughed when the quiet cowboy bid on the shy schoolteacher. But Benjamin and Penelope had the last laugh, living a love story that became legendary in Butte, Montana, a story that would be told and retold for generations. They proved that sometimes the most unlikely matches make the strongest bonds, that understanding can be more powerful than passion, and that love, real love, grows deeper and stronger with each passing year. Benjamin Sawyer passed away peacefully in his sleep in the fall of 1933 at the age of 86, with Penelope holding his hand. She followed him less than 6 months later, in the spring of 1934, at age 77. Their children buried them side by side on a hill on the ranch, overlooking the land they had built together, with matching headstones that read simply, "Benjamin and Penelope Sawyer, together forever." The ranch remained in the family, passed down through William's line, continuing the legacy Benjamin and Penelope had started. Their grandchildren told their children about the great love story of their grandparents, about the picnic basket auction, about the quiet cowboy and the shy schoolteacher who had built an empire of love in the Montana wilderness. And sometimes, on quiet evenings, family members swore they could feel Benjamin and Penelope's presence on that porch, still sitting together, still holding hands, still sharing the comfortable silence that had first told them they had found their match. Their love had transcended death, living on in the family they created, in the land they had built together, in the story that would be told for generations about how one moment of courage and one smile of acceptance had changed two lives forever, and created a legacy that would last through the ages.